there, and thank you so much for joining us today. Man, we are so honored that you would take a little bit of your time to join us for church this morning. My name is Stuart, and this is
Haley.
And we are going to dive into one of our favorite things to do here, which is what?
Shout out. So shout out to Allen, Texas, Auburn, California, and Davenport, Iowa.
Yeah. Look, we say that it's one of our favorite things here because it truly and honestly is, because we love to see how God is moving and taking a little bit of what we're doing here, and he's having it make impacts all around the world. And we're able to shout out to people because they do two things. What are those two things?
Tell us where and share. So type in the chat box right now where you're watching from. We won't stalk you or hover you parent over shoulder. We won't do that. That's kind of strange. I mean, he might.
Maybe,
I can't,
but it's because we love you guys.
Yeah. Church love, family.
Yeah.
But type in the chat box where you're watching and then share the feed, because your share will reach many more people.
Yeah, absolutely. The math and science behind the share button is simply this. For every click of that share button, you're helping us reach 100 more people with today's message, and you're letting them know that there's a God who is for them and not against them. So it's just one way that you can partner with us. Hey, we also want to let you know that while we have many people that are watching all around the world, we also want to give our shout outs to those of you who are watching locally as well, because you're a huge part of what God's doing here. So all of our friends here in the Walworth County area, thank you so much for tuning in every single week. We'd also love to encourage you that when you do click that share button and you share it to your Facebook feed, YouTube, whatever it is, make sure to use the hashtag Lakeland Anywhere as well. It's just a neat little way that you can stay connected with other people all around the world who are sharing the service at the same time. And for those of you who do share the service and use the hashtag Lakeland Anywhere, we'll be sending bumper stickers to 5 people each week who participate in that. And then not only that, but you're entering your name in for a church merch swag bag giveaway that we'll send to one lucky person. So if you're wanting to represent Team Lakeland because you're a part of Team Lakeland, we would love to be able to send that to you. So make sure you participate with that hashtag Lakeland Anywhere. But that's one simple way that you can partner with us. How else can they do so?
Yeah, so another way you can partner with us is through giving. So to support Lakeland and what we do, giving is a beautiful option to partner and connect. So you can text LCC Give to 77977. So text LCC Give to 77977.
Another way that you can partner with us, whether this is your first time with us or you've been with us for many times before, following today's service, we will have Start Here. And Start Here is just a simple way for you to get to know who Lakeland is and the path and direction that God has us on right now and how you can be a part of that. For fun, we got Pastor Josh that's going to be joining us today to cast that vision. So if you've ever had a question for Pastor Josh during the service, it would be a great time for you to drop that question in the chat. I can take some of those questions, or maybe this one. If Pastor Josh were to get into a fight with anyone or anything, maybe you could choose what that thing or person is, and we'll ask him how he would go about fighting that individual or thing. Let us encourage you today as we get ready to dive into today's service to find your moment. The finding your moment is where God is speaking to you. Whether you write that down or you take a screenshot, picture, whatever it is, share it with your friends, your family members, those who are watching the service with you, and be sure to use that hashtag Lakeland Anywhere as well. Again, it's just another way to share what you're experiencing today with those around you. We are so honored that you would take your time to be with us. If nobody's told you yet, let us be one of the first ones to say, Welcome to Lakeland.
All right, good morning. Welcome to Lakeland. We just want to invite you to stand and worship with us, whether you're here or if you're at home, we want you to join us too. Come on.
This is my worship. This is my offering. In every moment, I withhold nothing. I'm learning to trust you, even when I can't see it.
need that so much. I have to say that over and over again. Spirit, lead me. Because does anyone know what to do? Anybody ideas? Let me know if you figure it out. My kids do something. It's really relatable to me. Maybe it will be to you as well. When I look around and it just looks like a tornado went through the house, I'll be like, okay, guys, we're going to do a quick tidy. And my children, they have a gift. They can find the one thing that they are not going to be able to clean. Okay, so they will see the room of all the things that they should probably be responsible for. And they will go to this one thing and they'll be like, but what will I do with this? I cannot clean this. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe wait on that. That's true. That's probably not going to be for you. Why don't you look at what you can do? Why don't you look at what you know? What do you know? You know where it goes. Why don't you start there? And I recently felt the Lord be like, familiar, Darla? Because when I'm overwhelmed, it's very easy for me. I get my mind goes into a spin and I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. I'll kind of draw a whole board here of all the things that have ever hurt my feelings. And all the ways I've been disappointed and all of the things I cannot do because of my life circumstances. And I'll be like, And the Lord will be like, yeah, but maybe that's all true. Maybe I know that already. And I'm still calling you to walk in trust and faith in me. Even though, yeah, sure, some of that is true. The truth of it is he actually knows more than I've put on my board because he knows all the things I've also done wrong. And all the people whose feelings I've actually hurt because I was wrong. And he's saying, so I see all this, and I love you still. And I paid it all on the cross for you anyway. So maybe don't spend so much time here. And I gotta be honest with you, I'm not saying that we're too blessed to be stressed. Some of us are going through some really hard things. Some of us are truly overwhelmed. And that's okay. It's okay that we go through these hard things, and it's okay that we have real pain there. But we don't live in the pain, and we don't dwell in the pain when we're firmly grounded in the truth. And so, for me, when I'm so overwhelmed, I can't even think, I can barely get myself to read a passage of Scripture. I'm like, what? Sometimes I'm just like, I can't even think. I'm like, what is this saying? And I pray, and I feel like I just don't make sense in it, or I'm feeling something that's beyond words. Has anybody felt like that? When you're like, I know I'm supposed to go to God, but how do I do it? When I just can't even do anything right now. And for me, I've told you this so many times, it's worship. I love to surround myself either with worship music or to just belt it out on my own and remind my heart of the true things, to start with what I know. And I want to invite you in the next couple of songs, let's start with what we know. Let's start with what we can do, and we can worship. Wherever we are in our story, we can stand in the truth of what the Lord has done for us and is continuing to do for us in worship. Will you guys join me? All right, come on. He who was and still is and will be through it all. So come on, May, in the space between all these things unseen and this reckoning. I know I will never be alone. I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire, standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters, holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me? I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to Him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between wears thin. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. Another in the fire, standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Count the joy come every battle, that's where you'll be. Count the joy come every battle, that's where you'll be. Thank you guys so much for joining us in worship. You don't have to wait till next week when we're here to worship again. Worship at home, worship night and day, by yourself, with your friends. Thank you guys so much. You guys can have a seat.
Well, good morning. How's everyone doing? Good. It is so good to see you all. Let me just, before we get too far, let me just invite you to something. Immediately after this service, we have something here that's called Start Here. If you're relatively new to Lakeland, I want to invite you to that because we're going to just answer those questions of like, what do I do to start here? What makes Lakeland tick? What is this place all about? We'll give you a quick tour through the building as well as give you an opportunity to ask any question you might have to one of our staff members, some of our volunteers, and hopefully help you take a first step in starting here. Those of you joining us online, same invitation to you. I'll be hopping right into the live stream with you guys immediately after the service for Start Here digitally. So I just want to invite you all, if you're relatively new, join us at Start Here in the building right over here in the lobby space, okay, in the cafe. That's where we'll be meeting, okay? I was away this past week. My wife and I, we were on vacation, and I've come back, and I am super, as you can see, everyone looks at a tan, and they go, oh, you're refreshed. No, I need a vacation from my vacation. I'm exhausted. But it was a ton of fun. But I'm coming back, and I am so excited not just to be back with you guys, but I'm so excited to listen to Taylor this morning, and this is going to be fun. Give it up for Taylor already in advance. Let me tell you a little bit about Taylor. Taylor oversees our student ministry. She's our student director, and she speaks every week to our middle schoolers and high schoolers. But this is the very first time that she's speaking to us here. That is exciting. And she is an amazing communicator. She's incredibly sharp. She's brilliant. She's fun to have on our team. And here's something you should know about her. It was just a couple years ago that you were just sitting out here in the congregation, and you were volunteering in student ministry. Pastor Eric saw something in you and called you on up, and then you started leading more, and then into an internship. And then when he moved on to plant a church, you stepped into his spot, and you're loving it. And so here's what I'm going to ask of you, okay? Since this is her first time speaking here, you guys are going to bring all your engagement, all of your good feedback to her, right? So when she says something that's engaging or good, or you're like, that's so insightful, here's the modern day amen is come on. So on the count of 3, let's try. 1, 2, 3. Come on. All right, so then you can just do that when you're like, that's so good, come on, Taylor. And so would you just all now really give her a big welcome, and welcome Taylor.
Good morning. I paid him to read that script word for word off of a teleprompter in the back of the room. So thank you so much, Josh, for sharing all those nice things about me. My name is Taylor, like Josh said, and I'm the student director here at Lakeland, which means that I pretty much have the best job in the entire world. I get to hang out with middle schoolers and high schoolers every single Wednesday night. I have an amazing team, but it also means a few other things, okay? I'm used to communicating to a room that's like this big-ish, with way fewer people in it, and way fewer bald heads and receding hairlines. But hopefully we can still track this morning and have some fun, and you'll still learn a few new things. So I want to start off by asking you guys a question. Have any of you guys ever been super excited about something, super all in about something, and then almost kind of without warning something flipped? Could be a hobby, for example. I just got married about 4 months ago, and the guy that I married loves hobbies. He's a hobby guy, okay? I'm not a hobby girl, but I guess when you marry a hobby guy, you become a hobby girl, okay? So he loves hobbies, and there was one day that I was scrolling through the black hole that is Facebook Marketplace. Can anybody relate? Goodness gracious, so much money gets spent on Facebook Marketplace. So I'm scrolling through, and I see this little catamaran for sale. It's like a 1-2 person catamaran. It's called a cat yak, if any of you guys are familiar with this. And so I'm like, hey, Alex, do you want to go pick up this free catamaran, right? One of those free if you haul it kind of things. Like as long as you provide the truck and you show up, then you could take this thing for free. And so he's like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So we drive over and we get there, and this guy's house is like here. The lake is here, and the catamaran is here, and it weighs a lot. All right, so like Alex and my dad are hauling this thing up a super steep set of steps, and they're working really hard. They're sweating really hard, but it's worth it because we're really excited. We were like all in about sailing. And so we get home, or back to Alex's apartment, and we go to fix this thing up and take a look at it, and we're like, this is in rough shape, right? I don't know a ton about boats, but what I do know is that holes are not a good thing, right? I do know that much. And so there are holes and gaps and all sorts of stuff wrong with this little catamaran. And so we go out and we were buying like epoxy and silicone and all other kinds of things I don't know how to pronounce. And then Alex picked up some power tools, which he's a dude, so he was thrilled to have an excuse to buy power tools and spend money on power tools, right? So we get some power tools and we get to fixing this thing up, and we're really excited about this. We're like, we are crushing this. Like we are just getting this thing back to how it's supposed to be. We are like, what would it look like for us to buy up every single dilapidated sailboat and kayak in all of Walworth County and fix them and then operate like a watercraft rental company? We're just excited. We're taking this thing to the next level. So we get it into what we thought was saleable condition, right? We go to Lake Como, which many of you are probably familiar with, and we take it out on its maiden voyage. And it has been sitting in a storage unit ever since. The reason is because I'm pretty decently good at reading people. And so we unloaded this thing out of Alex's truck, and we got to the water's edge to launch it. And I turned and I looked at him, and I was like, you don't know what you're doing, do you? And he turns and looks at me. He's like, no, but it can't be that hard, right? It was hard, okay? I don't know if any of you have ever tried sailing, but first you need wind. And we didn't really have any wind. And second, there's like a whole strategy with like metal bars and the sail and catching the wind a certain way. And so we're literally in the middle of Lake Como YouTubing how to sail a kayak catamaran, okay? Thankfully, we brought our phones with us, but man, we're out there, and I'm just not having a great time, right? I'm like starting to get nervous. The sun's starting to go down, and I'm starting to panic. And kind of in that moment, we went from being really excited, or I went from being really excited about this whole venture, about going out sailing every weekend, to being like, I'm never getting on that thing ever again. And I think it's because things got real and scary and hard, right? When I was able to just dream about what it would be like or what it would feel like to go in the wind going through my long blonde locks, right? I was like, it sounds really great. But we got out there and I was like, this is pretty nerve-wracking. And the reason I share this story with you is because I think it translates perfectly to some of our faith journeys as well. I think about some of our students that when we come back from a retreat or a camp of some sort, and these students describe it as like a camp high, like they're just so on fire for Jesus. Or maybe there's people in the room who have been baptized. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago at church in the park. Maybe it was years ago. But you kind of emerge from the waters of baptism and you're like, I have never felt like this before. I've never been so bought in for Jesus. But the world doesn't just stop, right? Like life keeps moving on after those moments happen. And so sometimes life gets real and scary and hard. And then we're like, oh man, this is really tricky. Life is really tricky. Following Jesus can be really tricky. Can anybody relate? And that's what we're going after today. We're in week 3 of this series called Lake Life. We're looking at these iconic moments that took place in Jesus' ministry by a body of water. And in the very last chapter of John's gospel, we see this beautiful, restorative, redemption-filled story of Jesus redeeming a guy who went through something similar to what I just described. But unless we talk about some things leading up to that, that story's not going to make as much sense or carry as much weight. So here's what we know so far. We know that Jesus has come to earth as God in human form. That's a big deal, right? Big deal. He has called some of his first disciples. He's called these people to follow him. One of these guys was a guy by the name of Peter. And Peter, in my opinion, is one of the most fascinating, dynamic characters in all of the Gospels. We just talked about Peter last week. Jason talked about Peter last week, but I just think he's an awesome, cool guy to look at. But before he was a follower of Jesus, we know that he was a fisherman, right? And Jesus calls him from being a fisherman to being a fisher of men. I'm like, wow, Jesus, did you come up with that on the spot? That was good. That was so good, Jesus. But he calls him from being a fisherman to being a fisher of men. But it's also in this moment that Jesus changes Peter's name from Simon to starting to call him Peter. So sometimes throughout the Gospels, he's referred to as Simon, sometimes Peter, sometimes Simon Peter, all the same person, just laying this groundwork here, right? So in Luke 5, which Pastor Josh preached on a couple of weeks ago at church in the park, we see this story where Jesus called some of his first disciples, including Peter. And so it's this moment where these guys are out fishing, and it's shallow enough water to where Jesus can actually go walk out into the water and get into the boat with Simon Peter, and they're not catching anything. And so Jesus is like, go cast your nets in some deeper water. All right, and Peter's probably like, who's this guy, right? Like, I'm the pro fisherman. What does this guy know about fishing, right? But he's like, I'll do it. Like, I'll listen to you. I'll go into deeper water. So he listens to Jesus. They go out into deeper water, and they catch so many fish that their nets begin to break, right? Their boats begin to sink. And Peter and everybody that witnesses this is like, this guy's the real deal. Like, that was a miraculous catch of fish that could not have been possible apart from God. And so they leave everything and they decide to follow him. But this is just the beginning, all right? This is just the beginning of Peter's journey with Jesus. Peter is what I would have called an all-in follower of Jesus. one of Jesus' very best friends. Was Peter perfect? No. Did he make mistakes? Yes, absolutely. We'll get to that in a bit. But Jason already talked last week about the moment where Peter steps out of the boat. Jesus asked him to step out of the boat, and then his faith begins to waver, and he starts to drown, right? So we see these moments where Peter was a loyal follower of Jesus, but he also had these times when his faith wavered a little bit. We do know that he was loyal. We know that Jesus trusted him. In fact, when Jesus changed his name from Simon to Peter, we know that Peter is actually translated from the Greek word that means rock. And so Jesus changed his name from Simon to Peter, which means rock. And then he proceeds to say, I will build my church upon this rock. You think he's going to say he's going to build a church upon the rock of a guy that he doesn't trust? No. Jesus trusted Peter. He's one of his most loyal followers. But you keep reading throughout the Gospels, and there's a story, and you start to scratch your head a little bit. See, Jesus is reclining at a meal with his disciples, what we now refer to as the Last Supper. And so he's sharing a meal with his disciples. And he tells Peter, he leans over and he tells Peter that Peter is going to deny him. Check it out in Luke 22. Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. But he replied, Lord, I am ready to go with you to prison and to death. Jesus answered, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me. Peter's probably just as confused as the rest of us when this moment happens. He's like, what are you talking about, Jesus? What in the world are you talking about? I'm willing to die for you. I love you so much. I'm bought in. I am all in. But Jesus is God in human form. He knows everything. So we know that when Jesus predicted this, he knew that Peter was going to deny him. But I don't want you to miss the mercy of Jesus here. What did Jesus say? He said, Simon, Simon, Satan wants to sift all of you as wheat. I don't really know what that means, but I assume it means like making flour, right? Correct me after the service if I'm wrong, okay? But I think it means like sifting the wheat and making flour. And so what Satan wants to do is he just wants to absolutely annihilate Peter. Because Peter's doing good things, and so Satan just wants to take him out at the knees. He just wants to sift him as wheat and kind of put him in his hands and be like, you're gone. There's nothing left of you. But Jesus is like, I'm not going to let that happen, Peter. Yes, you're going to deny me. You're going to turn away for just a little hot second. But then you're going to turn back. And you're actually going to lead the rest of my followers when you do. So a short time later, we see that Jesus is arrested. We see that he's arrested at the Garden of Gethsemane. And we see that in this really heated moment, Peter actually takes a sword or a knife and he cuts the ear off of one of the guards who's arresting Jesus. And I don't know how many of you in this room should do that or would do that, but that's some loyal friendship right there. He's like, Jesus, I'm not going anywhere. I'm willing to chop this guy's ear off, and I don't care what happens to me, right? Like, he's like, I am not going anywhere, Jesus. So Jesus is taken away to be questioned by the high priests. And while that's taking place, Peter's waiting outside. And we're told in the text that he's standing around a charcoal fire with some servants and some officers of the high priest. And while he's standing around that fire, people kind of start to look at him. And they're like, hey, aren't you one of Jesus' friends? The guy that we're trying in there, like, don't you hang out with him? Like, aren't you one of his buddies, one of his followers? And he's asked 3 times, hey, aren't you friends with Jesus? Don't you know that guy? And all three times, Peter's response is basically the same. No, I do not know Jesus. No, I do not know Jesus. No, I do not know Jesus. It seems like such an obvious lie, right? It's like Alex and I getting out of the water with our little cat yak and somebody being like, hey, how was sailing? How was the water? And me being like, what sailboat? What lake? Right? Like, what in the world are you talking about, right? It was such an obvious lie. People had seen Peter hanging out with Jesus. They knew he had been hanging out with Jesus. And yet he says, no, I do not know Jesus. Honestly, Peter probably feared for his life in this moment. He didn't know what would happen if he said yes. But he says no. He turns away. Meanwhile, we know that Jesus is tried and convicted by the Jewish courts for blasphemy, for claiming to be king of the Jews. He's sentenced to death on a cross. He dies. But he raises again 3 days later, which is where all of our hope is found. And he begins appearing to important people in his ministry, including his disciples. We see this moment where the Marys, Mary Magdalene and Mary, Jesus' mother, go to anoint Jesus' body because they think that he's still in the tomb. And when they get there, what they don't find is Jesus' body, but what they do find is an angel. Check it out in Mark 16. The angel says, don't be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus, the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him, but go tell his disciples and Peter. He is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you. Did you catch that? The angel says, go tell the disciples and Peter. Why didn't he just say the disciples? Well, it's not because Peter wasn't considered a disciple anymore. It was just the opposite, actually. I'm sure that in this moment, Peter wasn't really sure if he was considered a disciple anymore. Whether the other disciples actually knew that Peter had gone through with denying Jesus or not, I'm sure that Peter thought that he was the absolute laughingstock of all of the disciples. And I don't know if any of you have ever been there before, but I know that I've said things in the past and I've done things in the past that are just so out of character for me that I don't even want to be in the same room as even my closest family and friends. I just kind of want to kind of bury my head in the sand. I bet that's how Peter is feeling. I'm sure that those 3 conversations that he had had around the charcoal fire had kind of begun replaying in his head, right? How in the world could I say that? How in the world could I do that? Imagine he was feeling pretty alone, pretty unworthy, probably feeling like a coward, like a traitor. So the angel is sure to tell the Marys that they need to seek out the disciples and Peter to make sure that Peter was there when Jesus appeared to them. So as we approach this story, in John 21, we know that Jesus has already appeared to his disciples several times. But let's pick it up in John 21. Afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved, that's John, said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, only about 100 yards. Does this story sound familiar to anybody? I think as a reader, you kind of start to go like, okay, Jesus, I see you, right? Like you're literally recreating the moment that you called Peter and some of the first disciples to follow you. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I need those reminders too. And right now I'm speaking to those in the room who have made that decision to follow Jesus, who have given their lives to Christ. It might have been 2 weeks ago at church in the park during that powerful service. It might have been 30 years ago. But whenever it is, that's the group that I'm talking to right now. Because I think sometimes we need reminders of what that was like when we were all in for Jesus. It might have been the day that we gave our life to Christ. It might have been a moment that we were just all in. But sometimes we need those reminders because life gets busy. It gets real and it gets scary and it gets hard, and sometimes it's easy to just walk away, even if just for a moment. I want to challenge you this week to think back to that moment, whether it was the moment you gave your life to Christ, if you can remember it, or a time that you were all in. Think about that time. And ask those around you the same question. Listen to people's stories. There's a lot of people in this room, I'm sure, who have given their lives to Christ, but who have drifted because they know about God's grace and they know about God's forgiveness and they know about God's mercy, but there's no way that it can possibly apply to them. So take time, reflect on your own story, and ask other people to share their story. I think God uses these reminders to prime us to follow him even closer. I know for me, when I think back to those big moments, those big milestone spiritual moments in my life, I was no older than 4 or 5 when I first gave my life to Christ. I remember sitting in the kitchen of my Nana and Papa's house down in Onarga, Illinois. And I remember sitting in the kitchen with my Nana. And I remember her sharing the gospel with me in a very real and tangible way for a 4 or 5-year-old. And she walked me through that, and she asked me if I wanted to accept Jesus as my personal Savior. And I said yes, and we prayed together, and I'll never forget that moment. And then I remember on my 11th birthday, it was just a couple of weeks after my grandpa had passed away. He was the first person that was real close to me that I had lost. And I remember it was the very first time in my life that I had really wrestled with the weight of eternity. Like, wow. My grandpa's gone, and eternity's a really long time. What does that mean, God? Help me understand what that means. But I rededicated my life to Christ and said, I'm not going to understand all of this, but what I do know is I want to follow you for the rest of eternity. And there's a lot of times when I need to sit back and reflect on these moments in my life because it's easy to just keep going through the motions. But we need to be reminded of that love that we had when we first gave our life to Christ and what that was like. I think it's worth noting, too, from this passage that Peter had walked away from fishing to follow Jesus, right? He had walked away. He had hung up his nets to follow Jesus. And then Jesus is gone, and what does Peter go back to? Fishing, right? So Jesus comes back on the scene, and he's like, Peter, 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 I equipped you. I equipped you to be a disciple. I called you to be a disciple. I called you to hang up your nets and to become a fisher of men, not a fisherman. And then I leave, and you go back to what you were doing before I called you to be a disciple. Come on, Peter. But how often when life gets real and scary and hard, do we just throw our hands up in the air, right? Like in our faith lives, this might look like just going back to the things that we were doing before we knew Jesus, right? Because sometimes that's just easier when life gets hard, is I'm just going to go back to those things. Maybe it looks at work, like things getting really, really hard at work, and you're like, this is just too much for me. I'm just going to procrastinate and put it off as long as I possibly can. Or I'm going to turn in work that's not the quality and excellence that God requires of me. Or maybe it's at home. Things are really messy at home. And so instead of stepping into that mess and restoring that mess, you decide to just spend less time at home. Because maybe the mess will go away if I'm not there. But I'm here to tell you, when you run away from one mess, you're just going to go to other people who are messy. And God calls us to step into the hard. He calls us to step into the mess. The good news, though, is that Jesus has a solution even when we do the exact opposite of that. Check it out in John 21, verse 9. When they landed, the disciples, they saw a charcoal fire there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." Don't miss the intentionality of Jesus here. I think it can be easy to just read through the text or scroll through the text on YouVersion and check a box and call it good, but this is such an intentional moment that Jesus has set up here. What kind of fire does it say that Jesus had prepared on shore? Charcoal. What kind of fire was Peter standing around when he denied Jesus? Charcoal. Do you think that's a coincidence? I'm here to tell you it's not. That Greek word for charcoal is anthrakia. It's only used 2 times in the entire New Testament. Jesus could have used any kind of fire that he wanted to. He could have made a wood fire. He could have spontaneously made fire appear, right? He's God. But instead, he chooses to use charcoal because he's showing Peter that he is redeeming every single square inch of Peter's story. We know that Jesus had already had a conversation with Peter, maybe several times when he had appeared to the disciples. He might have had a heart-to-heart with him and been like, "Hey man, that wasn't cool what you did back there around that charcoal fire." But it was still really important that Jesus has this moment in front of all of the rest of the disciples on shore to redeem Peter. It was so important that this moment took place publicly. Because if you remember, Jesus had predicted Peter's denial in front of the rest of the disciples. So if he was going to predict that in front of the rest of the disciples, he was going to bring it back together and restore it in front of the rest of the disciples. Jesus already knew Peter's answers to his questions. He wasn't sitting there wondering if Peter loved him. He knew that Peter loved him. He knew Peter's answers to his questions, but he asks him anyways, so that Peter can say with his own mouth, from his own heart and from his own mind, "Yes, Jesus, I love you." You remember he denied knowing Jesus 3 times. He now gets to affirm his love for Jesus 3 times. Jesus is restoring every square inch of Peter's story. Notice what Jesus asks him to do. He says, "Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, feed my sheep." Jesus is like, "Do you remember when I predicted that you were going to deny me? And then do you remember the second part of that, Peter? Do you remember that I said that you were going to deny me, that you were going to turn away, and then you were going to turn back? And I was going to ask you to lead my people?" Well, Peter, that moment is now, because I'm not going to be here forever. And Peter, I want you to lead my sheep. I want you to lead my people in my absence. You might be sitting there thinking, like, how in the world can Jesus just forgive him and restore him like that? Peter denied even knowing him. How can Jesus just come back and forgive him like that? Well, I think it's pretty simple. Jesus didn't dismiss Peter's sin. He paid for it on the cross. Think about the timeline of this. Jesus had just died on the cross for situations just like this. He knew that his most sold out followers were not immune from the spiritual battle that is constantly taking place. He knew that his most bought in followers were going to mess up. And let me make that a little bit more personal. Jesus doesn't dismiss your sin either. He paid for it on the cross. He doesn't just wave his hands and dismiss it like it's no big deal, because it is a big deal. Sin is a big deal. Sin separates us from God. But when we turn back, like Peter did, Jesus is standing there with open arms. And he's like, I forgive you. I love you. Come follow me. I'm going to do big things through you. This next part of the story is a little less glamorous, but I think it's worth sharing. Jesus predicts Peter's death to him. He tells Peter that Peter is going to die a death on a cross, like Jesus had, for the sake of the kingdom of God. Now, you might think that with this information, Peter would be like, seriously? Like, you had to tell me that information, right? You couldn't have just let me live in ignorance like everybody else and just die how I was going to die? But that's not how Peter responds at all. Instead, check out what happens. Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved, again, that's John, was following them. When Peter saw him, he asked, Lord, what about him? Jesus answered, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me. So Peter learns that he is going to die a death on a cross. And then rather than having some sort of reaction to it, he's like, all right, thanks for the info. What about John? What's going to happen to John? And how does Jesus respond? It doesn't matter what's going to happen to John. If I want him to stay alive forever, he can stay alive forever. I'm telling you, Peter, to follow me. Sounds a lot like my childhood, that's for sure, right? Like me and my 14-month younger sister. If I was gonna get in trouble for something, I wasn't just gonna take it, right? I was gonna be like, okay, but what about her? What about her? What are you gonna do to her, mom and dad, right? And the response was always the same. It doesn't matter. Just worry about yourself. That's what Jesus is saying to Peter here. Just worry about yourself. What about John? Peter, follow me. The same is true for you and I. Well, I want to follow you, but my friends aren't really into this whole Jesus thing, and I don't really know how they were. Follow me. Well, I'm the only one in my family that's chasing after this, and so I'm not really sure if it's right. Follow me. I'm the only one in the office. My coworkers aren't really into this whole faith thing, and so I'm not really. Follow me. Jesus is saying, follow me. And I don't know where everybody's at in their journey with Jesus. There's some in this room that they're going strong, going hard after it, following Jesus. There's some that are heading in maybe the right direction. And Jesus is just nudging and saying, follow me, follow me. And there's some in this room who've never made that decision before. And Jesus is saying, there's no other way. Follow me. It doesn't matter what the person next to you is doing. Follow me. Chase hard after me. Because he loves us too much to not call us to follow him. Would you stand and pray with me? God, I imagine that there are people in this room that need reminders of how good you are and how faithful you are. There are those in this room that are longing for restoration, that know that things have been tricky, that when life has gotten real and scary and hard, they've panicked. And rather than running into your loving arms, have run to the things of this world. But God, you are so good. You are so good and forgiving and merciful. Pray for those in this room that don't know what that's like, that don't know what that's like to have a loving Father to run to when life gets challenging. It's for those in the room that don't have that relationship with you, God, I pray that they wouldn't leave here today without furthering that conversation. To know what that looks like in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years when life gets real and scary and hard, that they can turn around and they can run to you and that you are just to forgive. So God, I pray that as every person in this room goes out today, they would not leave unchanged by this hopeful message, by this hopeful story that is shared. Lord, may it continue to work in our lives this week. We pray all of this in the powerful, mighty, merciful, forgiving name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. Hey, if you need prayer, there are prayer partners in the back. There's also prayer partners online. You can give here in the building or online. And again, feel free to stick around for Start Here. Thanks for being here this morning. Have a great Sunday.
Us today. What a powerful message from Taylor. Man, she just absolutely brought it. We're going to get into some of those moments from today's message. If you got your moment from today, let me encourage you to go ahead and drop it there in the chat. We'd love for you to share it. But as always, we have a team of people that would love to be praying for you. If you're in need of prayer, all you simply have to do is text that prayer to 262-435-4390. Or you can drop it you can drop the word prayer in the chat, and we would have people ready to reach out to you. So, Haley, takeaways from today? What's your moment?
So I loved how Taylor mentioned like how kind the Lord is to just remind us who he is, who we are, and what we're called to do. There's so many moments in my life where I've seen that happen, where he's like, Haley, this is who you are, this is who I am, remember. But I just love how kind he is to do that.
Yeah, so good. I love the all-in talk that Taylor was talking about. Doing nearly 10 years in student ministry, I know all too well those camp high moments. And really, many of us who have become followers of Jesus, we can definitely recall those moments where we got introduced to Jesus. We were all in, we were on fire. So let me encourage you this week just to ask God, hey God, take me back to that moment. Take me back to that sweetness of when I was all in for you. Remind me of what it was like to be completely on fire, because it's in those moments where we're ready to take on the hill for King Jesus and plant the flag, saying, man, I'm ready to take on the world for King Jesus. So just being reminded this week of that moment, what it was like, what it felt like Taylor mentioned. She can recall smells even for when that moment took place for her. And when you're taken back to that, to Haley's point, you'll be reminded of the identity of who God's called you to be as well. So we want to give a shout out to Chris. Thank you for hitting that share button for today's message. If you want to stay in the know of everything that's going on here at Lakeland, we have plenty of ways for you to do that through social media. Haley, what are those social medias that people can follow us on?
Yes, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I didn't know we had a TikTok. Is there another one?
We're TikToking. You can stay with us on YouTube as well, as always. So, hey, we're about to play a video for you to check out. After that video, Pastor Josh is going to be standing here where Haley's at for Start Here. So don't go anywhere. Don't click off just yet. Stick around for Start Here, and we'll see you in just a moment. Well, thank you so much for sticking around for Start Here. With us is Pastor Josh. I love that every single time. Hey.
That's how I greet people.
I love it. Pastor Josh is here. Whether this is your first time or you've been here 100 times before, but you're sticking around for Start Here to get to know Pastor Josh a little bit more and to get to know Lakeland a little bit more, Pastor Josh is going to vision cast that for us a little bit. So who's Lakeland? What are we about? Where are we going?
Yeah, if I could just encourage you in just a couple ways, it would be this. First off, just know what we're about. What we're about is this: helping people follow Jesus, be changed by Jesus, and commit their lives to the mission of Jesus. Maybe you've been watching for a while and you haven't kind of taken a next step, and you would say, man, I feel like I'm following. Maybe I'm starting to be changed by him, but maybe you haven't taken that next step to what does it look like for me to commit my life to the mission of Jesus? Well, it might be joining a team, maybe a digital team or something like that. But this is also how we often describe kind of what happens here at Lakeland. We have our weekend services, which you just participated in, but then all throughout the week, what happens Monday through Saturday? It's not like you just like your spiritual life turns off. Yeah. And we picture it this way. If you picture like a race, kind of like NASCAR, the weekend is where you get fueled up. It's the pit stop. You get fueled up, tuned up, and then you get sent out to race. And all week long, Monday through Saturday, you're racing. And really, the people who keep you encouraged and on track all week long is your impact community. And so one of the next steps, if I could encourage you in your probably the most important next step, it would be to get into an impact community. This is where they're helping you make an impact outside of yourself all week long, as well as a community building you up. And so if you're like, what's next for me? Your next step is probably to get into an impact community and then probably join a team, join a digital team, help make a difference in someone's life in the same way that your life has been impacted on the digital platform. And so thanks so much for just being with us and sticking with us for Start Here. And Stu, what else?
So if you're ready to take that next step, join the team, or hop into an impact community, all you simply have to do is text us at 262-435-4390. You can either text Stuart, you can text All In, you can text Next Step. Either way, just text us, and we would love to have that conversation with you in order.
Text us.
Just text us. But wait, there's more. But we would just love to have that conversation with you for you to be all in, just like Taylor was talking about today. So, all right. People want to get to know you a little bit more. As you're talking about racing, Melissa and I just went and saw Fast and Furious 9 yesterday in theaters. So if you had to get into a fight with Vin Diesel,
Oh, Lord.
how would you go about winning that fight?
You know, it was my argument with my wife of why I should shave my head. I was like, listen, Vin Diesel, he looks good.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, The Rock, he looks
That's
good. So I'm like, look, this is good. It's all good.
Yeah.
To win in a fight with Vin Diesel, I think you got to stay low, okay? You're gonna have to get really low to avoid and get underneath him. I think that's the only way, because his top is gonna take you down.
Yeah.
You got to go low and take him down low in the legs. That's how you fight Vin Diesel.
Are you trying to say that he doesn't work on the legs nearly as much?
think so.
He skips leg day?
No, he skips leg day, just like me.
Vin
Skips
Diesel?
leg day.
Vin Diesel, this is a call out. You and Pastor Josh, leg day workout.
Leg
I
day.
want to see who wins
He'd
this.
kill me. Have you seen his legs? He does. He has chicken legs, just like me.
mean?
All upper body.
I see a fight happening. This theoretical fist fight is going to turn into a real one real quick. It's going to be amazing. Everybody's going to be coming to Lakeland to watch Vin Diesel and Pastor Josh duke it out. So, hey,
awesome.
we're so honored that you would take any amount of your time today to join us, learn how to fight Vin Diesel, learn a little bit more about Lakeland. We look forward to connecting with you and seeing you next week. But until then, have a great week. God bless.
See you guys.